Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Hello, squirrels of the world, and welcome, welcome, welcome. We have a big day today in the world of law, trial. Tomorrow, a big day as well. Today, we had not only day 15 of Karen Reed's trial, there's also P. Diddy going on, but Becky Hill was arrested. So we are going to jump right on into that. But first of all, shout out to James being the first like here as well for the video. And also, side note, this live stream should redirect you guys into the next live stream, which will be coverage of, like I just mentioned, day 15 of the Karen Reed retrial. So we will be jumping into that as well. Welcome, Candace, saying, oh my God, it happened. Oh, it happened. It happened in a major way. And as you can see, who else gets a warm, fuzzy feeling inside when they see SLED in South Carolina? I certainly do. You guys know how I feel about Murdaugh case and everything related to it, all the Murdaugh adjacent, as it were. So yeah, here we go, guys. For immediate release, May 14th. This happened today. SLED charges former Colleton County clerk of court with perjury, obstructing justice, and misconduct in office. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, aka SLED, shout out SLED, got our command in the chat for that as well, charged Mary Rebecca Becky Hill, 57, with perjury, obstructing justice, and 2 counts of misconduct in office on Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. And we talk a lot about how difficult it is to get charged with perjury, and it takes an extreme situation for that to happen. I would say that this counts as one of those extreme situations. SLED was requested to investigate by the South Carolina Attorney General's office. Details can be found in the attached warrants. Hill was booked into the Colleton County Detention Center, then the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center in Richland County. Case will be prosecuted by the 11th Circuit Solicitor's Court. Here we go. Okay, here is the warrant, guys. Let's zoom in a little bit here. Okay. So here we go. In Richland County, South Carolina, on or about January 29th, 2024, that Rebecca Hill, being the elected clerk of court of Colleton County, did willfully and unlawfully give false, misleading, or incomplete testimony while under oath of a court record. So this was at the evidentiary hearing regarding potential juror tampering, what have you. Of course, that we covered all of that. We've talked about that at length. And Judge Gull put it on the record that she found Becky Hill to be untruthful. And that was a big deal. And I'm sure a huge part of this arrest. During the hearing, keep reading. During the hearing, former Clerk Hill did willfully and unlawfully give false and misleading testimony when Chief Justice Toll, did I say Judge Gull? If I said Judge Gull, I meant to say Judge Toll, Chief Justice Toll. I might have said Gull because Gull has come up recently in conversations. Anyway, if I said Gull, I meant Toll. They rhyme. Chief Justice Toll asked former Clerk Hill, quote, did you allow anyone from the press to view the sealed exhibits, end quote. And Hill responded, quote, no, ma'am, end quote. This statement was inconsistent with the events of February 28th, 2023, when former Clerk Hill did release or make available sealed evidence photographs to a third party or parties. And then here we have that in Colleton County, South Carolina, on or about February 28th, 2023, Rebecca Hill, being the elected clerk of court of Colleton County, did unlawfully commit an act which prevented, obstructed, impeded, hindered, or potentially impeded or hindered the administration of justice, to wit, while preserving evidence during the course of the General Sessions murder trial of Alexander Murdaugh, did release or make available, quote, sealed evidence, end quote, photographs to a third party or parties, such act. So in other words, there's one charge for making this sealed evidence available and another charge for lying about it, right? Such act occurring in violation of a written court order issued to protect the sealed evidence photographs. Okay. Next we have that in Colleton County, South Carolina, on or about June 7th, 2023, Rebecca Hill, being the elected clerk of court of Colleton County, did willfully, dishonestly, and unlawfully breach her duty of accountability to the public as imposed by law by failing to properly and faithfully discharge said duty to wit. Hill did promote a book in which she was the author, Behind the Doors of Justice, The Murdaugh Murders, while using her public office to promote the aforesaid book on social media, such act being for her own financial gain and in violation of her duties, in violation of the laws of South Carolina. So promoting her book and she did so in the public building, right? While in public office for personal gain. And then we have that in Colleton County, South Carolina, September 1st, 2021 through March 5th, 2024, Rebecca Hill, being the elected clerk of court of Colleton County, did willfully, dishonestly, and unlawfully breach her duty of accountability to the public as imposed by law by failing to properly and faithfully discharge said duty to wit. Hill requested and then received $9,880.10 in financial bonuses for herself that were paid from the Title 4D incentive funds. Such funds were obtained by Hill and utilized for her own financial gain. Furthermore, on or about March 5th, 2024, Hill received a financial gift and or bonus in the amount of $2,000 paid by a check from the Colleton County Clerk of Court's office funds and utilized for her own financial gain in violation of her duties and further. So that's where you get to it's almost $12,000 that she took for personal gain there. So that's and all of this was also addressed in the ethics violations, right? But this is what we were waiting for, right? The ethics violations that amounted to criminal culpability. James asking a good question. What is the penalty for this? I don't know. We will see more things coming out. She paid herself. Yep. And we did cover the ethics violations where it details, it has all the receipts, it has all the emails, it shows exactly how she went about doing this in a different video. I'm sure it was a live stream. But that, yeah. So I don't know what the penalty will be. However, she did post bond and we have her bond hearing, which we will also watch. But first of all, we do have a statement here. Let me just unshare, reshare. Okay, so here's a statement from Dick and Jem, our good friends. We've been, it's funny the timing of this, right? Because we've just been revisiting trial testimony from the Murdaugh trial, and we've been seeing a lot of Dick and Jem. So on Wednesday today, Murdaugh attorneys Dick and Jem released the following statement, quote, "We are aware of the charges filed against Becky Hill, and while these developments are serious, they are not surprising. I agree. We have long raised our concerns about her conduct during and after the trial, and this arrest further underscores the need to protect the integrity of the judicial process. Every defendant is entitled to a fair and impartial trial, and we look forward to Alex Murdaugh finally getting that fair treatment." Now, one thing I will say as far as the penalty or the punishment, the fact that she was booked into custody and then she posted bond, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that she could be facing some sort of jail time for this. I would also imagine fines, having to at the very least repay back the money she took for her own personal gain. But this is all very new because this just went down today. So, and actually, I haven't actually watched the bond hearing video yet. We're about to watch it. And they might discuss in that bond hearing what her potential penalty is. So we will see. This is not federal. This is state. This is state. This is state charges. Okay, so now let me pull up. I just have to unshare, reshare. Murdaugh retrial is a completely separate issue that is moving its way through the appellate courts. And again, as you guys have heard me say, I expect to go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. That is still in that process, long process for all that. So these charges are tied to that in the sense that some of these charges are due to lying at that evidentiary hearing, which was about his trial, right? However, some of these charges are also not related. For example, the one stemming from, what was it, 2021 to 2024, like her stealing funds through her official office with the like the different expense accounts and whatnot. That's not related to Murdaugh at all. So there's some like obstruction. So there was the obstruction of justice as per the sharing of sealed exhibits and then lying about the shared exhibits. So those are related to Murdaugh, but then the other, the misappropriation of funds is not related to Murdaugh. Oh, and then you had her book, promoting her book, right? So 3 out of the 4 related to Murdaugh, 1 out of the 4 not related to Murdaugh. DSN, welcome. Does that mean Poot will not be defending Becky? I don't think so. So shout out to DSN. Shout out to Mary, welcome. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to watch now. This is Becky Hill's bond hearing, and she looks way different. There she is. I think she actually looks younger with her different hairdo. So that's got to be her attorney down there at the left.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Judge Fishburne. I'm going to conduct the bond hearing today.
In the middle.
I want to welcome everyone. We have Agent Trozewski, Agent Fitzgerald, Attorney Mr. Lewis, and the press.
Mr. Lewis.
So welcome, everyone.
Mr.
Ms.
Lewis.
Hill, will you please state your full name for the record?
Mary Rebecca Hill.
Thank you. Do we have the
And apparently she turned herself in.
they on the, okay, I see them. They're back there. I just want to make sure that the agents were there. All right. I'm going to go through the rights and responsibilities. I'll advise you some information, and then at the end, we'll hear from the state and we'll hear from your attorney. Okay. All right. Before I set your bond, I need to advise you some information and make you aware of your rights.
Okay.
You've been charged with 2 counts of misconduct in office and obstructing justice. These penalties for these three, they're common law penalties, so it's at the judge's discretion.
Okay, there you go.
However, I can tell you that typically the common law crimes carry possible penalties of 0 to 10 years.
0 to 10
Your
years.
court date is scheduled for July 18th, 2025 at 9 o'clock at the courthouse at 101 Hampton Street. And do you understand the charges and penalties?
So for those 2 charges, I'm just going to reiterate what she said because I know it's kind of quiet. So what she said was for those 2 penalties so far, it's at the trial court's discretion, but they typically carry a penalty of 0 to 10 years. Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And I assume you're familiar with that location. So because this is a general sessions offense, you have a right to a preliminary hearing. This is a hearing that will determine if the prosecution has enough evidence to move forward with the trial. If you wish to have a preliminary hearing, you must request it within 10 days. And I'm going to send that paperwork with your packet for the preliminary hearing. If you'd like to have that, you can go ahead and sign that now, and then we'll get that scheduled.
James is saying she'll have to pay it back and get probation. I think that's a likely outcome, especially because she has no criminal record or anything like that. To my knowledge, I would be shocked if she did. I think that's a likely outcome. Pay it back, and she'll probably have some additional fines, and probation. I think that's likely.
Before you can plead guilty or not guilty or proceed to trial, you need to know you have a right to an attorney. And I see that
That's
you have
another thing that's interesting. So pleading guilty or not guilty, it might behoove her, and I don't know if they'll offer her a plea deal or not. I would think maybe so. If I were her, I would take it, and here's why. 1, because any trial is only going to, I would imagine she's got a family and all that. I don't think she wants the publicity of a trial, and that trial would be highly publicized. I think she hadn't been in the radar for quite some time. And I think she would probably rather have people forget about this and move on. Just my personal perspective on that. And she can move on with her life doing whatever else she can do. I would imagine that, going quietly into that good night, as they say, would be the best outcome for her. And with a plea, she's going to get found guilty if she goes to trial, right? That's the thing. She's going to be found guilty. A plea deal here makes a lot of sense, especially, again, having, to my knowledge, no criminal background, no criminal record. And she's going to get the most generous, if you will, sentence, and the least harsh sentence if she does a plea deal. Obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if they do offer her a plea deal, and it is, again, like what James suggested: pay back the money, here's some extra fines, probation, done. You know what I mean? But we'll see what else comes of this.
I have an attorney here, and am I correct? It's Will Lewis.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
I'm surprised that I don't know him, because I feel like I know most of these attorneys in this area, and they all seem to coincide and commingle with each other, but he's a new face for me. So
You need to know if you're ordinary at any point, you can apply for a public defender. I'm assuming you want to stick with Mr. Lewis at this point. Okay, what I will do, I will send the application in your packet for public defender in case things don't work out and you change your mind. So you will have that application. Okay.
By the way, guys, I will put the SLED warrant. I will put that in the Discord as well for you guys.
All right. Would you please give me a good telephone number? And you know what? I think with the press, we're live streaming. I'm going to get that after, so we don't have that on the live stream. Okay. And I'll check with your address for that as well. You do need to know you keep your address and phone number updated with the court. You're required to notify the court if you've had any change of address into the completion of the case. Not receiving the notification due to the wrong address will not be an excuse for not attending court, and a bench warrant could be issued for your arrest and your bond revoked. You have a right to request a jury trial, and the jury trial would be judged by a jury of your peers as opposed to a bench trial with a judge. You have a right to be present at your trial, and you need to be aware the trial will proceed in your absence should you fail to attend. And in general sessions court, if you do not appear, you can be fined an additional $5,000 and 5 years in jail. If your charges are dismissed, or if you're found not guilty, if they're not crossed, you may request to have your record expunged, which means it'll be taken off your record like nothing has ever happened. Do you fully understand your rights and responsibilities I've gone over this morning?
Yes.
That's a great thought, Candace.
Okay. At this time,
Unless they can preclude her from doing that. Oh, we got another.
This is Adam Spolzeski with SLED.
Oh,
Your Honor, we have no recommendation as far as bond.
interesting.
okay, all right, thank you. And then Counselor, would you like to address the
Yes, Your
court
Honor.
this
Will
time?
Lewis, and may it please the court, and I apologize for sitting down and not saying it, but speaking to the court is the only way I can get in your screen.
The cameras are a little messed up, I know.
Yeah,
The position that they've taken under 17 or 1510, we're entitled to recognizance bond, her own recognizance absent, showing that she's a danger to the community or risk of flight. She lives here. She turned herself in. We found out about these charges last night. We're here right now.
And to that end, that's exactly why she turned herself in, right? Because that way it's like, look, she's compliant. She's not at risk of flight.
So we'd be asked that she's released on her own recognizance.
All right, all right. Ms. Hill, are you currently on probation, parole, or out on bond now?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and then, how long have you lived at your address?
25 years.
25 years.
All right, I do not find you to be a flight risk or danger to the community at this time. Before I set your bond, I must apply stipulations of the bond, and if you break any of these, it can result revoking your bond, and you'd be subject to remain in jail until your case has been called to trial. Do you understand? Okay, you must appear at all your court dates. You need to keep the peace. In other words, stay out of trouble. Because I do not find you a flight risk or a danger to the community, you are entitled to a PR bond. I'm going to give you a PR bond of $10,000 per charge for a total of $30,000.
Wow.
And that'll do it. Thank you all for being present and so attentive. But Ms. Hill, before I sign off, do you have any questions or anything you want to ask?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, yes, sir. I see you, Mr. Lewis.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm sorry to bring up this right now. There's one issue that we were hoping to resolve. There is a Richland County warrant for perjury related to the obstruction warrant at 166. We would ask, and I have the agents, and I'll confirm this with Solicitor Hubbard, who has the case, as well as SLED. I've also reached out to Judge Scott's office in Richland County, and they are okay with this. We would ask under 22-5-190, which establishes your powers, Your Honor, that you endorse that warrant for it to be served here.
Yeah, that makes
What that will allow you to do,
That
Your
makes
Honor,
sense.
under State v. Ravens, is set her bond on that year, and that would just avoid us from having to go all the way to Richland County and all the processing, and perhaps not be there till 9 p.m. just for some paperwork. And I've confirmed with all parties that they have no issue. I do think from a practical perspective, and this is why we wanted to talk to you, once you endorse the warrant and they serve it on her, there might be like 5 minutes of paperwork to do, kind of like what we did this morning, and then we'd reissue the bond. So I was hoping Your Honor would be open to that. It's also permissible under your bench book at page 35, the 2011 bench book, and I've got an Attorney General opinion as well that I'm happy to provide the court for this authority.
Okay, I got word that you were possibly going to ask that, and I'm not inclined to do that. I've talked to our Chief Justice here. We want to keep this simple. We want to keep it within our jurisdiction, and so I'm not going to do that today. We're sorry for the inconvenience, but we're not here for convenience. Okay.
I hear you.
All right, and that's basically it. So now, guys, we're going to jump on over here. So Will Folks of Fitz News did a interview with Dick Harpootlian. This was just recently. Great opportunity to watch this. So we're going to jump on into that. And I haven't watched this yet. I don't know if they get into Becky Hill or what, but we're going to hear from, we're going to take a look at this interview here and see what they have to say.
Figures, probably South Carolina history. Dick Harpootlian. Thank you for joining us. I got to ask you, do you like legendary or veteran? Which one of those sits with you best?
I am legendary and I am veteran, so it's hard to pick. But in terms of most outspoken in South Carolina history, we got John C. Calhoun, we got Ben Tillman, Strom Thurmond.
Recent history.
Well, I might agree in recent history, only because all the good ones are dead.
Well, you've rarely minced words, man. So I mean, for me, it's a compliment. I mean,
well, why would you mince words?
well,
I mean, I don't get it. When I was in the Senate and giving a speech, right over us was a painting of John C. Calhoun and then Dum Spiro Spero. And after 6 years over there, I proposed that we change. And I got a Latin translation for a new motto over the Calhoun picture, which would describe the Senate I got to know, which was, "Let no dead horse go unbeaten."
Did you actually have the translation?
I had the translation, and I wanted to put that up there in Latin. You couldn't get anybody to co-sponsor, but it really, I mean, that's the problem with government, is the bloviating, the
Hi, Meg. Welcome.
inability to do what we do in private business, which is figure out how to get from A to Z without going through the other 24 letters. Matter of fact, they relish going through the other 24 letters. They're hoping they only get to the 16th letter and time runs out. I mean, it's...
He looks, and to me, he looks better than he did in the Murdaugh trial. He looked oftentimes in that trial like he was about to keel over. Looks like he's doing better health-wise. What do you guys think?
Government, I don't think it's always been that way. At least that's not my observation, but it's gotten painfully ineffective for all kinds of reasons.
Remember, he's also a politician, right? In addition to being an attorney. So
I do not miss the Senate.
I believe it. Well, they're scared of their shadows over there. Most of them.
It's all about, can you get reelected?
Mm-hmm.
Not, can we get something done? Because they want to come back. Because they come back. Because they get something done, but they don't get something done because they want to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a vicious cycle. Now, that's nothing new. There's, if you read Al Gore's father voted for a civil rights bill, knowing it would defeat him. And he did it anyway. Mm-hmm. That's profile and courage is what we need more of. And there's not many, if any, of those in government these days.
You can count them on one hand. Tom Davis, maybe.
In the Senate, I mean, Tom Davis, one of the good guys. I like Wes Clymer. I know he and I.
Having said this, okay, if they're going to be taught, these are all these local politicians. I don't know. This is as much what we want to hear about. So let's just see if they get into more Murdaugh related.
South Carolina centric, but one that, and again, we're going to talk in detail about this book, but the story of Pee Wee Gaskins. First question I want to ask you about the book is, what gravitated you to that story?
Well, I've been practicing law for 50-something years, okay? And I prosecuted, not necessarily in trials, but handled dozens of murder trials and hundreds of murder cases as a prosecutor in 12 years of being a solicitor and assistant solicitor here. The Gaskins case was unique in a number of different ways. One was, here's a guy who's got convictions for 13 prior murders, and then being the head trustee at the most secure wing of the most secure institution in the state, takes on the job of executing an inmate on death row.
Okay, so Pee Wee Gaskins. Let's just go ahead a little bit and see what else.
I mean, think about that guy. He drowns a pregnant woman because she's one of his former girlfriends. executed for killing an African American in the history of the state.
Sounds like he wrote a book about Pee Wee
People,
Gaston.
13 previously
Gaston,
convicted, and then time.
Okay, fine.
Have a practical effect of perhaps sparing his life.
Well, if he had told about the other 100 he claims, yes, but that's why I think that's total bullshit. Was going to change the system, do it from the inside, not bitch from the outside. I went to work for him. Solicitor in Ori and now state senator, Barney parts.
But Solicitor Pasco, again, I think a lot of folks, he's got enemies.
More
Threat
local politics.
to society. You know, not because he got angry with his wife and
Okay,
her mother.
hold on.
And the guy down in Ori that he commuted, I would respectfully disagree with the president. That guy's sentence should not have been commuted. He should still face. Look, anyone, I believe that the death penalty is appropriate when the person poses a threat to society. You know, not because he got angry with his wife and her mother and shot both of them and qualifies technically for the death penalty. But somebody that, and that's probably the only murders he'll ever commit, as opposed to somebody, Gaskins serving a life sentence, eligible for parole in 10 years, and takes it upon himself to blow up a guy on death row. I mean,
It's not remorse.
that's textbook. I mean, he's still killing in prison. So, I mean, I don't disagree with what David said. I do disagree with President Biden, who I know is Joe. I mean, he's my friend. But he makes mistakes just like everybody else, and that's one of them.
When you're representing his son, Hunter Biden, right now, who quite a colorful history. How's that case going? What do we?
Well, we got a trial last
what?
week in July.
Hold on. He's representing Hunter Biden? Wait, what?
But he makes mistakes just like everybody else, and that's one of them.
When you're representing his son, Hunter Biden, right now, who quite a colorful
What?
history. How's that case going? What do we?
Well, we got a trial last week of July
Did y'all know that? I didn't know that. That's insane. What?
in Los Angeles. I spoke to Hunter this morning. We're preparing for trial. And again, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not a defense attorney. I'm a lawyer. The duties and standards, whether you're on a civil case as a plaintiff's lawyer or a defense lawyer, are different. Play by the rules. You'll sleep soundly every night and never regret a single thing you've ever done.
We're going to dive into the political questions again in a moment. But before we get there, you referenced just a minute ago, bending the rules, hiding the ball on the part of cops, on the part sometimes of prosecutors, judges doling out these lightning fast sentences. Let me ask you this. You've been in this justice system for a long time here in South
Half a
Carolina.
century.
Wow.
Is it better now? Have things changed? Is it still the same?
I mean, it's
corruption?
better now. Well, it's better now because there's more transparency. There's more transparency,
Agree with that.
you know, not necessarily because of a redesign of the system, more transparency because of people like you, because of the internet, because of things can be scrutinized remotely. You don't have to go down to the courthouse, go through the boxes of stuff to get the files. It's better in some ways. I'm disappointed. When I started, there were 16 old white guys as the circuit judges in the state, one per circuit. Now they're 40 something and much more diverse. That's better. But I get the sense because of the selection process that they're more worried about, in some instances, the rating they'll get from anonymous submissions. I'm totally opposed to that and tried when we did judicial reform to just say, look, you don't like a judge? Say it and say why this was the
Shame on it,
case.
right?
And they messed it up because they did this, that, or the other. But don't have these anonymous criticisms that you can't respond to. That's number one. Number two, when I started, I can remember Judge Louis Rosen from Orangeburg, and Louis didn't tolerate incompetence. If you're trying a case in front of him, you better know the rules, you better know the law, and you better try it in an effective way. Prosecutor or defense attorney. And Louis would, at the drop of a hat, if you asked a question, defense or prosecution, and he thought it was not particularly relevant or smart, he'd interrupt you in front of the jury and say, stupid. And I'd say, Your Honor, that is a stupid question. Don't answer it again. Don't ask it again, which made me a better lawyer because I'm just up there freewheeling. And all of a sudden I get slapped in front of the jury. The jury's smirking. They're laughing. Okay. Which is not a good thing. So I tried a case one time in front of a guy named John Grimble, World War II hero, the guy that took Remagen Bridge and held it, that cut the war short. And he would have added 6 months if the Germans had been able to destroy it. Just a courageous guy. And I tried a case. It was a tough case. It was a rape case. And we got a conviction. And the guy named Dennis Bolt was prosecuting it with me. And we sort of high-fived each other when the verdict came in. He gets sentenced. Elderly bailiff comes and gets me. and asked me, says, the judge wants to see you. And Grimble talked in a very quick tone. So I walked back to his chambers. He had a big table like this he's working at. He worked with pencils, wrote everything out in pencil. And he was sitting there working, and I went to sit down. I said, do not sit down.
More storytelling. Let's see what else they talk about here.
Their entrails were on the
This guy
on the
named,
podium.
guy named, wasn't it
More
Pitt?
politics.
Yeah, the process.
I
You
would
mentioned your party that is currently mired.
a lot to talk about Miss Becky. I mean, this was so recent. I'd be shocked if they don't bring up Miss Becky or Murdaugh. Let's just see here. National Convention. Yeah. You know, Will Folks, for anyone who's not familiar with as familiar with Fitz News, he's really into politics. So, you know, that makes sense as to why they're talking about that, but it's just not something that we really talk as much about. Okay. Now there's Murdaugh.
Actually, situated African American percent African American vote together, Republicans.
Mhm. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned being glad to be back in the law, having some great cases. Let's
Okay.
talk about one of those cases that's gotten a little bit of attention nationally, internationally. This redheaded guy down in the Low Country, former assistant solicitor, member of one of the most powerful families in the state, a legal political dynasty down there in the 14th Circuit in the Low Country, Alec Murdaugh. You were his lead attorney
He
in
is.
his double homicide trial and his various financial trials before state prosecutors and judges, before federal prosecutors and judges. Let me ask you this. Did you ever expect this story to turn into what it has become, which is just, we've mentioned it earlier, Murdaughpalooza, the movies, the podcasts,
No,
Yeah,
I
they're
did not.
making
I mean,
another show
What
about
did that happen?
well, let me say this. We're sitting in a room. You're sitting in a chair that Paul Murdaugh sat in with Maggie and Alec right there,
Really?
as Jim and I sat here and got them ready for the boat trial.
Wow. That's
So,
wild.
I mean, you know, there was some controversy over that case, but did I ever think that would explode into the murder case? Did I ever expect Alec to be accused of killing Maggie and Paul when they walked out of here holding hands?
And you don't think he did it?
I don't think he did it.
Let me ask you this.
Wow.
Who do you think did?
Oh boy.
I have a theory. If there wasn't a chance the case might be
Remember, guys, we have emojis for that one now.
retried, I'd let you know. But I have a theory, and there's some evidence to support that theory, which we could not use in the first trial. It's complicated.
Well, I do have to put you on the spot here, though, because
Put them on the spot.
the forensic debate during the trial, the theories that were put forward by your expert, theories that were put forward by the state's expert,
God.
when you look at the crime scene
I put
photos, when you look
two
at autopsy
11-year-olds.
photos, which were not publicly released, the only people that saw them were the jury. But when you look at that evidence, which I believe at the very least the press should have been granted official access to,
Right.
it does lend credence to the prosecution's theory of how they were killed. And it did, in my mind, looking at some of that evidence, take away from the theory that you're saying you've got a theory that,
Okay, let me say what the state and the defense and the prosecution agreed on was, and their expert agreed with us, is whoever shot Paul would have been covered in blood and brains. That they were so close. We said it was a contact wound. They disagreed with that, but they both agreed that Paul's head basically exploded. His brain hit the ceiling, ended up at his feet, and blood and brains went everywhere. Whoever shot him would have been embedded with brains and blood. There's no evidence
Closed off at the kennels, yo.
or witness that puts Alec's clothes. I mean, it would have. One of the experts testified he could have would have taken a significant amount of time in a shower to get all the blood and brains out of the hair and whatever. They never found. They checked that night. They checked the shower. No blood and brains. There's nowhere they found any evidence that he had showered off brains.
what about the hose at the dog kennels?
Thank
That such a
you.
big deal was made about it being not where it was supposed to
Obviously.
be. Isn't the theory implied by the prosecution he hosed off at the kennels?
Yeah.
Any blood? Any brains? No. Who was there that night? I mean, what SLED says is, yeah, there were no blood and brains, but, we're incompetent. We didn't gather evidence that night. We took no
Come
fingerprints
on, dude.
in the feed
Fuck
room.
the angel.
We took no DNA in the feed room. We didn't check for blood over by the hose. But, don't give the defendant the benefit of the doubt about any of that. We're just incompetent. There were tire tracks that we drove over. There's all kinds of opportunities to gather evidence, which they didn't do. So that's one piece. The other piece is the uncontradicted evidence is Maggie's phone was thrown out on the side of the road at exactly the same time. Alec cranked up his car a mile away or 3/4 of a mile away. How do you do that? I mean,
he didn't throw the phone.
couldn't have thrown the phone. He's
No,
cranking up his car.
And the
No.
evidence related to that, which was introduced, is a big part of your appeal. And I want
Yep.
to ask you about the appeal, but pulling back a little bit from that grisly crime scene, I want to go back to something that you said very early on
he's misstating the evidence there.
in this process. You referred to this case as an Ozark situation, a reference to the show about the money laundering, this very
interesting.
sophisticated drug cartel money laundering operation. You used that term Ozark situation applying to this case. What did you mean by that, and what can you tell us?
Well, I think, we can look at a couple of things. One is that the financial records indicate that literally millions of dollars went to Eddie Smith.
Yeah,
was
but he
Alec
was
Murdaugh's-
cashing those check, dude. Alex was writing this is where the laundering, he was writing the checks to Eddie Smith and then having Eddie cash them and give the money back.
Drug
just-
runner, check casher.
Cousin, right, whatever. And there was a pattern of Eddie getting drugs for him,
No.
allegedly Oxycontin or Codone. And Alec had no question, huge drug habit.
Wow.
He went to rehab while he was out on bond.
This is hilarious.
Doctors indicate he had all the symptoms of somebody coming off of a massive drug addiction. What never was explored by the state. And by the way, Eddie Smith's still walking free. The evidence would indicate
Oh,
he
that's great
participated.
news. I didn't know he was walking free. That's great news because he was held in custody for a long time. I didn't know he was out. That's
In
good.
the sale of and distribution of millions of dollars of illegal drugs.
Oh, come on.
I think that there's an explanation of what happened that involves drugs.
When in one of your pretrial motions, you and attorney Jim Griffin, who you referenced earlier, pointed the finger at Eddie Smith as being potentially involved in the
Wow.
homicides.
Well, if we get a new trial, you'll hear all about it.
Well, let's talk about that process, because a little over a year ago in the Richland
Well,
County Courthouse,
interestingly enough, Alex had plenty of opportunities to throw Eddie under the bus, and he was even asked directly. He was like, "Nah, he didn't do it."
just down the street from where we're filming this, there was an evidentiary hearing about allegations of jury tampering involving
Here
the
we
clerk of
go,
court
Becky
down there in
Hill,
Colleton County,
guys.
the
There
former
it
clerk
is.
of court. She's resigned in disgrace, most would agree, who allegedly tampered with the jury in this trial.
Yep.
At that hearing, one juror went on the record and stated that not only was there tampering, but it influenced her decision.
Correct.
4 others affirmed that there was tampering.
Correct.
Let me ask you this. Why the hell was that not game, set, match? And why was a new trial not ordered that day?
Well, you'd have to ask
You
Justice
know.
Toll, but that's part of the appeal. We believe that there's a federal case directly on point. There's no state case that supports Judge Toll's position. We believe, and we've put in our brief, that she misinterpreted a decision from Judge Kittredge. It didn't say what she said it said. But the South Carolina Supreme Court will have an opportunity. We hope by the end of this year to hear argument on that and
interesting.
correct what we believe was a mistake.
What do you think your chances are there? There's so much discussion about, it's 50-50. It's what do
I
you
mean, if you look at the federal case, what are our chances at the state level? I mean, that's not the only issue in the appeal. We talked about the cell phone being thrown out and the expert they qualified, who we believe should not have been qualified. If that evidence
Talking
were not
about throwing the phone
contradicted,
around the office.
but if their expert was knocked out, that's enough to
Not
give us a new
that
trial.
it blows their whole timeline out of the water.
Correct. And there are a number of other.
They didn't object in a timely fashion. They said they were fine. That was Mr. Barber dropping the ball, and they said they were fine with him being admitted as an expert. And we've talked about that.
Issues like that, the 2.5 weeks of financial crimes before we ever got to the murder, the forensics and all of that. So I can't give you, we should get a new trial
From the Supreme Court.
from the Supreme Court. We believe they may have a different view of the law than I do, or that the federal courts do. If they deny that, then we'll be going to federal court on a habeas to give the federal court a chance to
I
apply
expect that.
the federal standard.
I expect
Were
that to happen.
odds for Alec Murdaugh at the state level or the federal level, which would you say?
I believe the Supreme Court is going to give us a new trial.
Really?
I think this is one of the best Supreme Courts we've had in my 50 years of practicing law.
Now, there are those who say that the Supreme Court wants this to go away. They believe this has been a stain on the legal profession, that a lot of your allies in the
I
trial
think he's
lawyer lobby.
referencing let me back it up. I think he's referencing the South Carolina Supreme Court. I expected it to not go there, or I expect it to not go their way in the South Carolina Supreme Court and to go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Let me just back it up to make sure which one he's referencing.
Give the federal court a chance to apply the federal standard.
Were odds for Alec Murdaugh at the state level or the federal level, which would you say?
Okay.
I believe the Supreme Court is going to give us a new trial.
Really?
I think this is one of the best Supreme Courts we've had in my 50 years of practicing law.
Now, there are those who say that the Supreme Court wants this to go away. They believe this has been a stain on the legal profession, that a lot of your allies in the trial lawyer lobby want to kind of get back to
I think
business.
they're referencing the South Carolina Supreme Court.
That this has been an inhibitor. I mean, after all, Alec Murdaugh is not just the scion of this powerful family that I mentioned. He was the leader of the South Carolina trial lawyer lobby for a very long time. So this is a guy who literally led the organization that is representing the trial lawyer lobby. Very powerful.
That's about money. This is about justice. And again, based on the forensic evidence, I don't believe Alec Murdaugh killed Paul and Maggie.
Right.
And again, I had an opportunity to watch them for a year, watch the chemistry, watch the interaction. There was never indication. And by the way, the government, the state's theory, their motive is that he thought he was going to be discovered because of some transaction, 2:00 in the afternoon, and decides to distract by executing Maggie and Paul. I mean, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. But the jury, you didn't have to sell the jury on that, because after 2.5 weeks of him stealing money from widows and orphans
Stop crying about this, Poot.
and mentally deficient and
Quadriplegics.
you never got to that. Is the forensic evidence sufficient or not? So, I mean, it was a good strategy by the government.
Heard about the forensic evidence before they got into any of that, Poot.
But I think an illegal one.
Let me ask you about, we've talked about the jury tampering, which when we write about it now, I don't even view it as alleged anymore. I mean, it has been confirmed on a court record. There was tampering. But let me ask you about something a little more sinister that has been alleged by one of the former jurors. A lot of folks don't remember, but hours before the verdict, a juror was removed from this panel,
Right.
for allegedly speaking out of turn against the judge's instructions about the case. This juror has written a book in which she claims that she was the target of a conspiracy because she would not go along with Becky Hill's attempts to sway them. She basically says, I was targeted because I was a holdout. I wouldn't say where I came down on the case. You followed the Myra Crosby story.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in those conferences with the judge, with Myra during the trial.
Do you believe this jury was not only tampered with, do you believe it was rigged?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say anything publicly about the former clerk, but certainly there are questions that need to be answered. And they should be answered by a thorough investigation. I'm not sure that Alan Wilson's shop, Alan, who called Becky Boo at the press conference after the conviction, who has a relationship with her, ought to be supervising that investigation. I know SLED agents had not even talked to these jurors until last week, almost 2 years after the offense, a year after Judge Toll's order. So I'm not sure that the Attorney General's office is sincere in their claim that they're going to investigate this matter. And I think that is a problem. I think that this, again, I believe that prosecutors should approach it. I know there's political pressure involved, but they should put that to the side and do their job in an ethical, honest, and open way. And I don't believe that's going on right now.
Should SLED be investigating?
No, absolutely not. No. This idea, this part of SLED is investigating it, and this part of SLED, they weren't involved in the trial. No. I mean, they ought to ask their sheriff's departments, whether it's Richland County or Spartanburg County or Greenville, well, not Spartanburg, but Greenville County, or I mean, there are other big sheriff's departments that have investigators. This isn't a complicated crime.
Greenville County could easily do it. Leon
Lott could easily do it, and step away from having the same people who have a stake in this trial being affirmed. Get them away from this investigation.
In fact, Leon Lott would be perfect. He's actually had some acrimony with SLED in the past. I mean, it would to me instill some confidence if he were to come in and say, "Hey, they did it right."
And he's got professional, long-term investigators. Some are still there were there when I was solicitor.
You know Mark Hill. You've worked with Mark Hill. He seems like a guy that has integrity. How does this pass the smell test for a guy like Mark Hill?
Well, I think Mark Hill is an administrator, and he's administering 2,000 employees. One of the things that came up during the trial speaks volumes about SLED, which was up until November of 2000 and when did we do the trial?
23.
22, right?
23.
23.
23. Okay. So in November of 22, they were still claiming that there was blood spatter on
not this again.
Alex's shirt.
We were just talking about this because we were watching the defense closing, and I was like, oh my God, all of this is objectionable. This whole thing with the blood spatter. I can't even believe he's bringing this up.
Blood.
You gotta be kidding me.
Holly Miller, that works for me, was in preparation for the trial was coming up in January, was going through every document again. And she found the report that Sweat had for like a year and a half, which said that was not human blood. And we brought that to the attention of the Attorney General in, like I say, right after Thanksgiving, prior to the trial in January. And it was a explosion. So how did and of course the Sweat agent, David Owens, admitted on the stand that he had read the email with the report a year and a half earlier. And they were building this case based on that blood spatter.
Well, that was what convicted him in the court of public opinion.
Correct.
Leading up to the trial.
Correct. I think he published a number of stories about it.
I don't think that was my tip, though. I think that might have been one of my former employees.
Former employees, right, whose credibility is somewhat questionable. But
Yeah, I
but
covered.
the fact of the matter is that how do you, I mean, if that's your key piece of evidence, why hadn't that been scrubbed by the agency? That agency on one hand is saying, oh, that's Paul Murdaugh's blood. Their forensic chemists are saying that ain't even human blood.
Well, not only that, was, if I recall correctly, there was an attempt to bury this in some files that were not easily retrievable. Is that?
I will give them the benefit of the doubt and say that was just more incompetence, that there was not a active effort to obscure. Although, again, those were not in the file that when they gave it to us. If Holly Miller had not gone,
PR, who do you think it's PR for? Who? For Alex or for the Democratic Party, or who do you think it's PR for?
Through and looked at every document, thousands of pages, we never would have caught it. They'd be putting evidence up that was Paul Murdaugh's blood.
Would you agree, given the extent to which the Murdaughs were fast and loose at times with justice in the 14th Circuit, to the extent that they at times, perhaps in Buster's era, old Buster, perhaps used some of the methods you referenced earlier, hiding the ball,
Right.
Things of that nature.
Well,
Given that was what built that empire, how important was it for the prosecutors, for the investigators, for the judge in this case to get this right? Because it literally is, it's not just Alec Murdaugh on trial, it's the system. And now we're in a situation where we can't even trust the integrity of this verdict. And there's like a full-scale verdict protection racket going on instead of what you mentioned, a search for actual justice.
Well, here's the consolation. I believe this Supreme Court is not in the business of protecting verdicts. I believe John Kittredge is the most honorable, perhaps the most honorable and honest, and we've had other very honorable and honest chief justices, but he is, in these times, currently, the man for the job. And the other justices are, I think, every one of them. If you look at all their other decisions, when they struck down initially the abortion bill, that's just saying hell with politics, or the funding for private schools. The politically easy thing to do would have been affirm both of those, but they didn't do that. And I believe this Supreme Court, especially, not that others have been overly politicized, but I have full faith that they will do the right thing.
You believe they can withstand that political pressure from?
Well, I think they've got an easy way out. I think the easy way out is the jury tampering, because it's not the judicial system. It's a person in a county, an elected official, who admitted, based on the testimony, that she was in the business of selling books, and a guilty verdict would be better to sell.
One key takeaway here, as it pertains to Murdaugh, right, is he really has a lot of faith in the South Carolina Supreme Court. And like I said, my expectation, squirrely crystal balling it, as it were, would be that the South Carolina Supreme Court denies the appeal, and that this makes its way all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. But if he's correct, and I don't know the South Carolina Supreme Court, and he does, and he thinks that they have a really good shot there, then maybe he won't make it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. This is from just recently, maybe a week ago, maybe not even a week ago. So before Becky Hill's charges, because that was today, obviously. But yeah, this is really super recent. It might have even been on Friday. So yeah, very recently, this interview. But yeah, I think it's interesting how much faith he's putting in the South Carolina Supreme Court, as it pertains to this, to Alex's appeal.
Oh, books. That's the testimony of two other clerks of court that were working with her.
Yeah,
well, this isn't exactly a compliment, but I can tell you, your book is better. Not exactly a compliment, but
what about better than the egg ladies?
Hey, that one was pretty good. Dick, thank you for all this time. You've been incredibly generous. As you think back on that half century of your life that you've devoted, whether it's to the party politics, whether it's to justice, you look back on that life. Let me ask you this question. What stands out to you as the biggest difference that you feel you've made?
Good question.
Well, I think that, in each stage of my life, whether it was as an assistant solicitor and then the solicitor or a county council or chairman of the party or the Senate, each one of those offered an opportunity to push what I think is my personal agenda, which is that government should be transparent and responsible. When, I'm in the Senate and I'm talking to a senator about helping on something, he said, well, that'll get me beat. My response is, why do you want to be here if you can't do what you think is the right thing? And today, and I mean, in my opinion, the Congress, Republicans and Democrats, have abrogated their role, and they're not willing to step out and say what they think is right, whether it's about the Ukraine or whether it's about, my wife corrects me being an ambassador, it's not the Ukraine, whether it's about Ukraine or about immigrants and due process. By the way,
Ukraine.
I think if you're here illegally, you ought to go home. But I think there ought to be a process to determine if you're here illegally.
Again, he's a politician as well as an attorney for anyone who's just now getting here. I didn't know. Apparently, he's Hunter Biden's attorney now, which is crazy. Speaking of Biden, there we go. Got carried away. But as it pertains to the politics, again, that's not quite as interesting here to me. Let's just see here.
Mass
Destruction.
or-
No, So they're big lies.
Fiction. Yeah.
Big lies. So anyway, I've had fun. I think the bottom line is whatever I've done, I've had fun with, and not that they weren't serious issues. The Murdaugh case. I mean, whoever anticipated millions of people would watch that on television?
I did.
Whoever anticipated? We didn't even, because we weren't watching television and weren't looking at social media. We were getting ready for trial every day. It was probably the second week of trial when we showed up and people were in sleeping bags outside the courthouse to get in. We're going. I asked one, "Where are you from?" Oklahoma. Well, you just near? No, we drove here. We wanted to be in.
I guarantee people came further than that.
Nuts.
Oh, should
When it's said and done, will you write a Murdaugh book?
Ooh.
I think Jim and I have talked about it.
Ooh.
It would be Jim and I.
Oh.
We've kept video and notes,
Wow.
video evidence and notes.
If
are
they
great.
ever write a book and release it, we will read the whole thing cover to cover live here on this channel. Better believe.
Like the staircase, which we would use if it came to that. But we can't do anything until the case is over.
We're a ways away from that.
And we're years away.
Yeah,
from that.
Mary. So I've covered it gavel to gavel once, but we've also, this is my favorite trial and my favorite case of all time. And even last night, day before, we've been revisiting key testimony of the Murdaugh trial because I just missed it. And right now we are on closing arguments. But yeah, I've got, and this video included is on, I've got 2 different Murdaugh playlists. So feel free to check those out. And at some point we will rewatch the trial gavel to gavel again, as well, when we have a break from some of the other ongoing trials that are happening right now. Yeah. So this is my favorite trial and my favorite case. So.
But having written this book, I understand now the process, which ain't easy. And I understand that we'll find out whether people want what I'm selling and the way that we're trying to tell the story. I mean, as I said, I sat in this room with Paul and Maggie and Alec and Jim. Jim went fishing with Paul. I mean, we had a relationship with those guys.
Like I keep saying, right? This is why Jim Griffin was so, like, I was literally just talking about this. We were just watching the defense closing arguments, and I literally was talking about how Jim is just too close, right, to this family. And here he is talking about how they used to go fishing. Also, real quick, I will say, as far as the gavel to gavel, I started out when I was covering that gavel to gavel, I started out using like EDB's footage because I didn't think anyone would care what I had to say. But then a couple episodes in, the Scroll Crew voted, and they voted that I stop using that and that I just use the court feed and that I give my own commentary. And that's what I've been doing literally ever since. So first couple of videos, you'll notice that there's EDB's commentary, and then you'll notice that it switches over to and if you watch with live chat replay, you will also see where people in the Scroll Crew voted on doing my own commentary. So.
Alex's father, Randolph, and I were solicitors together. He down there, me up here. So I had a relationship with him. I never knew Alec, but I knew Randolph, and I knew his father, Buster, pretty well back in the day. But we all, it was a different time. It was a different vibe, if you will. And they were from, that part of the state, which was, we didn't quite understand. And by the way,
right.
plaintiffs' lawyers
or city
didn't go
boys
into that circuit. if you didn't associate the Murdaughs or this firm or that firm, remember that's where Bob McNair, our governor, Saul Blatt were from. And they ran the legal business down there with Buster for many, many, many years. It was closed shop, not like Richland County or Greenville County or Charleston County. Different. And I think it's changed now. And by the way, what's happened in that case has changed dramatically how we practice law. I'll give you an example. One of the problems with one of the cases down there was that the judge approved a settlement, never filed an order.
So it's Carmen Mullen,
I'm
correct?
not going to call names, but okay. But
Carmen Mullen. Oh boy.
I just did a death settlement on a case last week. We've got to file a proposed order.
I'm just going to
Pardon me. It's going to look at a judge. The judge called
Harder for lawyers to
years ago. And somebody asked me, why are you still prosecuting cases after 8 years? When my friends had gone on to more lucrative, I was making 40 grand a year. I said, because every day I get to go up here in front of 12 people and entertain them and plead with them.
entertain them.
They can't get up and leave.
Well, that's true. They're
Doesn't get any better than that. So
Well, I know you've got a ton of lawyering left to do, but I hope you write more books, because I'm telling you, this was, for those of you, we're going to put it up here, Dig Me a Grave. It is gripping, man. And the way that you got in.
So this is Dick's new book, and it's about Pee Wee Gaskins. I hope that him and Jim do write a book when all is said and done with Alex's case. And we, like I said, if that happens, we will definitely read it.
His mindset and the way that you kind of traced through all of the experiences that shaped this killer Pee Wee Gaskins. I mean, it's riveting
And
stuff.
Pee Wee
Like
Gaskins- Pee Wee
thank you.
Gaskins-
And let me say,
Pee Wee Gaskins is an infamous South Carolina killer. But they're wrapping up this interview. I'm gonna go ahead and this should redirect you guys into the Karen Reed live stream. So we should see you guys on the other side here in just a sec. But that is all the updates here for Becky Hill and Murdaugh, and we will, as always, stay on top of it as more things happen. But that's it for this one, and I'm gonna go ahead and roll the outro.